Hello and welcome to this episode of Harmoniously Podcast. Here's Melissa.
This is Rachel. Good to see everyone again or virtually be with you.
And as always, we're going to start this podcast with a little arriving practice. And then this podcast will be about intentions. So everything about intentions, how to set intentions, how to work with intentions during ketamine treatment, and so on. So if you're ready and if you're not driving, you can close your eyes and take a comfortable position. So I invite you to. And let's just start to relax and come into this space all together. So let's just take one deep, big breath. And just allow ourselves to be arriving to this moment, to be arriving to this call, to be open to the discussion, to the knowledge, to be open to all that we're going to talk about. Just let's take another deep breath, allowing ourselves to become present. And then slowly we can come back to the call. All right. So I normally do this arriving practice in my coaching sessions. They normally are also longer. So I just do a very quick version for the podcast. But it's always nice to be able to take that second. It may look a little useless for the people that are not used to do. It's like, why are we taking 1 second to just stop and take a breath? This is a waste of time, but it actually not, because it really helps you to center and be present and be more efficient to whatever you're going to do.
And I totally agree. I do this throughout my day. I do this throughout changing roles and busy work and just working with others. Sometimes it's really nice to just take a moment and check in with myself. It allows me to feel more grounded, more present, and also just kind of more attuned to even my own self. I think sometimes we get so stuck in that forward trajectory that sometimes recentering back in the present is so valuable for me. And that's part of that mindfulness or meditative type practices that can really, even scientifically have been incredibly well supported, that really help us with whatever it is we're trying to do. So I agree. Big fan from way back. Thank you.
Of course. And I also wanted to highlight that because that's also very important as we're going to talk about intentions.
Yeah.
So that could be a beginning practice to think about your intention. Just take a moment to arrive into that moment before writing down what is that you want from your ketamine session, for example, as we're talking about intention for ketamine. But of course, we can also say that we can decide on intention for many other things that we want to do. It can be a session, can be a yoga class, can also be, as we just said, your work, you can put intention for your day and so on.
Yeah, I think that's a super valuable point. Intentions are great for medicine sessions, but they're not limited to just meditation session or medicine sessions. They're widely larger than that. We can set intentions for anything. So it's a valuable practice to learn in the first place. And maybe we should start with kind of what the definition is of intention, right? What does intention mean? What does it actually mean?
Yeah, we just checked before coming to this call. I always like to start by looking at the dictionary for who have already checked our previous podcast. So my before medicine life, I can say, I don't know.
Yeah.
So my have a background as a linguistic and languages and cultures. So I always love to start with a definition, checking the dictionary. And so we found that the definition of intention, according to the Oxford Dictionary, so the number one is a thing intended, an aim or plan, together with the action or fact of intending, and a person's plan. So that's what I think that's the most common definition. That's why it's number one.
Yeah.
And then we were both surprised to see number 2 is the healing process of a wound in medicine.
I think that's so beautiful and can be so accurate in many forms of medicine, like that we're actively trying to assess and heal a specific wound, which I think can play very well for intention setting in medicine sessions as well. Like we may not be talking about a physical wound, we may be talking more about an emotional, a spiritual wound, wounds we've been carrying, a grief wound, all kinds of other wounds. So I think this is a really important kind of sidebar to the actual definition of intention.
Exactly. And then the last definition is the concept in logic. So I think it's logic and mathematics. Conceptions formed by directing the mind towards an object. That's also what I would probably think when we think about intention as synonymous is aim or purpose. So there is this like a very like almost like as you have an arch and the arrow, and that's it. You have the intention to hit the target.
Yes, exactly. Like there are times to know where we're going and there are times not to. But with an intention, this is something that we're intending to go somewhere, right? We're intending to arrive in a different space or with a different outcome, right? So we typically have to, it's like having a map in some ways, right? Like we're kind of organizing some cartography or the landscape of how we arrive from one place to another. And I think that's a really beautiful way to kind of conceptualize setting an intention or having an intention or forming an intention.
Yes. So although like in medicine as in life, it's not as straightforward as like using your arch and the arrow. So the target is not like that straight.
Yes.
But it's definitely very useful, and that's why we always suggest, and we also use intention setting. It's so useful because it helps you to put all the energy, to focus all the energy into one direction instead of being too scattered.
Yes.
And at the same time, and that's the beauty of setting intention when working with non-ordinary state of consciousness or any other psychedelic or a coach, a therapist. The beauty of this is like there's so much in just this process of setting an intention. There's so much more awareness, understanding of yourself, and healing that goes on.
Yeah, I think that's really like hitting the nail on the head is to say that like setting an intention, the practice of this is far more than just setting an intention. It's also like a self-awareness. It's developing emotional awareness. It's developing thoughtfulness surrounding where we are and where we'd like to go. It's also acknowledgement of some of the wounds that might be present or the places that feel difficult or challenging. And it's setting an intention, a movement forward to say, I'd like to heal these places. I'd like to explore these places. So it can be really valuable across the board. And it also is seen a lot in like mindfulness practices, meditation practices, and other types of practices. It can be really valuable when we're working with like psychotherapists, when we're working with coaches, facilitators, right? This is really, I have gone into therapeutic relationships and I've always had an intention, right? What do I want to get from this experience? Whether it's a medicine session or a new career, intention setting is a big deal.
Exactly. And also, this reminded me while you were talking, how sometimes we may not have an intention, at least a conscious one. We didn't take the time to phrase what is the intention that we're going into something with. But we may have, at least for sure, we have unconscious expectations. Now, as you just said, I'll go to a therapist with an intention, and that will support the whole work with that therapist or any other practitioner of any kind that will support that work, because also the therapist or the coach knows how to support you, right? If you don't have that intention, you may have some unconscious expectations that are often in that case when there is not this prior work, those kind of expectations are often a sort of hope this person will fix me.
Yeah. Yes. And
You
it's
know, like,
never right for the most part. No one is ever fixing us. We are fixing us. We are learning how to fix us through others, right? And I think that's an important differentiation to make, is that most of the time, you're right, these kind of subconscious or unconscious expectations that we have without a formal intention. An intention is a conscious process, right? For the most part.
Yes.
But when we have these kind of expectations, we really are setting ourselves up to have disappointment, which is inevitable, right? We're all going to be disappointed in life. But it is setting up these relationships, these tools to be more disappointing if we're not aware. Because an intention already is kind of aware of what the expectation might be. It involves that. So we're able to kind of limit some of that expectation versus what our intention is. And I think the world around, right, if we talk about intention setting, there's some crossover into a lot of other territories. So goal setting, right? Similar to goal setting, similar to manifestation, right? When we talk about more of an energetic channel, we see a lot of intention or intention type work with manifesting, right? Directing our energy into more of an abundance or less scarcity or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of crossover in a lot of modalities with intention. So it's an important practice to kind of learn, yes, for medicine sessions, but also for other parts of life that it can be incredibly valuable at directing our energy or focusing our energy. And also just having that awareness of self, that we're on a journey somewhere and we're heading somewhere else. But there are some important, like, I think, caveats to intentions, right? And some other kind of guidelines that do help us when we're setting an intention. Because an intention is not setting a exact, precise final destination, right? An intention is somewhere we'd like to head off with the energy to go, but the destination is sometimes unknown. So I think that's sometimes where we see the difference between a goal and an intention, is like an intention doesn't necessarily have a very precise end game. It has an opening energy to what is next, right? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's like, I would say the main difference between a goal and an intention is like a goal is very much something that we decide with our logic brain.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And an intention is more that we want to find with checking with other parts of ourselves, not just the logic brain.
Yeah.
And that's why the logic brain, the goal can be very specific, and that often works out. But
Yeah.
in general, anyway, in life, there's many other elements that comes in. And while we are thinking, while we are working on intention, as I said, we are checking with our whole being. So also, however, not many of us may call it in different way. We call it soul, higher self, emotional body, but we understand that we have more than just a logic mind. And so we check with all these parts what really feels right. And that's a process. And as you said, what really feels right may not be that as specific as a goal setting, because it's not using the logic, that the logic will be that specific, right? But will be more of sort of a quality of the being. That's what I like to say, more of a quality. So quality is, in a sense, specific, but open, because it's not logically described. And also how to get there will stay open. So it's not, again, the arrow to the target that is straightforward. It will be, and that may be where many people will have difficulties of also be able to set that intention right, but then imagining, so having an expectation that will happen this way. And when we go into working with non-ordinary state of consciousness, this will happen in ways that we can never imagine.
They don't exist currently, right? So I think that's such an important place to kind of make, kind of an important guardrail, is that, like, we're working with capabilities and capacity that don't exist in our regular, like, ordinary state. So when we're entering the state, especially in this context into medicine sessions, we're now working with a different capacity. We're working with a very different consciousness. So we can't always even imagine what that may be or what direction it will take. Sometimes it's got a Kundalini energy. Sometimes it's got a spiral. Sometimes it may take a few twists and turns. So it is about being open to that process, looking the way the form it takes, right? So there is an openness to it. Before we dive into like setting an intention and what that might sound like or look like, I want to hear just a little bit. I think, Mel, you have a really good background in Indigenous and cultural like medicines that are historically used. I would love to hear a little bit about like the Indigenous kind of intention setting. Like, how does that look? How long has it been used? Like, what else is it used for, especially in like ceremony or plant medicines, ayahuasca, other types of, settings. Tell me a little bit about the background of an intention. Like, this isn't something new, right?
No, but it's definitely different. At least, so I trained in Peru with Shipibo. So there is not an idea to have the participants formulate intentions in a sense, but there is this intention approach to everything during the ceremony. Okay. So which also brings respect of every aspects in the ceremony. So for example, they're gonna take any tools, right? The medicines, the call medicines, are the ayahuasca in that case, or like mapacho, which is sacred tobacco, or like agua de Florida. Those are the main tools. Or even like when singing the ikro, the medicine songs. So whenever you take one of these tools, you take it with permission and respect. You ask for permission, and then you just don't use it that way. So, for example, mapacho is sacred tobacco that would be used to be like to clean, to I have the I don't know where did it come from.
Very animated today. Yeah.
Someone's agreed with me.
Yeah, the spirits agree.
Okay, perfect. I appreciate that. So you use it for cleansing, for protection, but when you take it, it's the idea is like you're programming the tool, and so you blow your intention, say please may I use you, and I will need to use you to clean the energy of this person or for protection. So I let the spirit know how I will need their assistance.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very much in this way mostly. And then it's not really intention, but I would say it's part of it, because as we said, intention is almost this idea of grabbing all your energies to be focused into, just be focused. So this centeredness and focus is what you use during the medicine songs, the ikros. Yeah, so these are how they use intentions in those circles.
So it's almost like intention is embedded into like all aspects without it being this formal kind of personal intention. It almost feels like a community or like a fabric of intention, right? Everything has an intentional or purpose, a plan, a place, and is respected as such with thoughtfulness, right? Like it's really cloaked in this kind of thoughtful purpose, right?
Yeah.
So I love that aspect. Do you ever find that in other medicine ceremony or sessions that the like individuals participant, is it ever something that we discuss an intention, or like how does that work in other ceremony? Have you ever used like a personal intention setting in any other kind of in more an Indigenous medicine?
I mean, yes, when I do ceremonies, I always ask all the participants to share their intentions before the ceremony starts. But as I said, like the Indigenous people don't, would not ask each person. But I would personally do. And also because I'm a coach and I really like to support people in guiding them in setting intentions. So it's beautiful to review the intention before, says the circle, before the ceremony starts, and having a sharing circle all together. And I also find it very useful. As we said before, setting intention is a process itself. So that of self-awareness and self-knowledge. So I always love for people to take some time to set the intentions, especially, I mean, always, but especially if you approach this for the first times, it's where you may have less of an understanding of what you're going to do. And after that, when you understand the process, then you're able yourself to set more intention, work with this medicine your own way, and so on.
I think when we have a familiarity with the energy of the medicine or the sessions, it can allow us our intentions to kind of unfold, or our intentions to kind of change, right? When we have an idea of how this may feel, may work, I think that does arrive. And that's why it's important to, I think, set a first intention, but to also practice this idea of non-attachment to the intention, where it goes, how it works, whatever may be there. I love that. So maybe let's just start at the beginning. Like, how does one sit down and formulate an intention? And it's not unlike a lot of other processes, right? Like we might set a goal with our logic mind. We might set an intention with our practice of yoga, or with our meals for the day, or what have you, right? Like it's not terribly different. But specifically when we're talking about preparing for a ketamine session or medicine sessions of any kind, where we're really entering that non-ordinary state, I kind of frame this to folks that we don't have to set the intention right before. It should have some thoughtfulness, right? So it doesn't have to be the moment that you're beginning and just, oh, okay, I better come up with a, intention. It can also start days, weeks, months prior, right? Like you may come into this knowing kind of what your intention is. So, and I encourage people to never start with the first thing they think, right? Like we want to take that first thought and we want to unwrap it a little bit, right? Like a lot of folks that I work with would say, I just want to feel better, right? And that's an important kind of intention. And I encourage people to sit with that and kind of unravel that a little bit. Like what's underneath that, that kind of process of going inward. And that may take a few hours. It may take a few days. It may take a few weeks. But do you find a similar process, right? Like maybe don't start with the first thing that comes to mind. Like it should be full. It should be kind of a deeper sense of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's how you start. The best way to start is it's really seeing what has come to mind first. And also, I mean, if you're already signed up for this kind of ceremonies or a treatment, there is something that pushes you to that. So that's the first thing you can start. You can start then discover and explore more, as you said, see what's behind that, and go down that rabbit hole you want. That's the right rabbit hole you want to go down.
Exactly. That's the rabbit hole to choose. Yes, totally.
And really see what's behind and what's behind and what's behind till you feel you get to the very root of that. And yes, there can be a general, as you said, I just want to feel better. I said, okay, and then let's start from that. What better means for you? You can go, I would say, high or low. In a sense, high in the super conscious. So where are all our qualities and potentials, or the future stored, and it's not in our conscious field, so we still don't know what that is. And so that's where going up is like, what is the vision of what does it mean, what feeling better means for you, and like unfold or that, or you can go down in more of the subconscious and see, so what makes you feel the way you feel now, and so on, so you can start exploring this unconscious parts, or again, the superconscious and the subconscious.
Yes, definitely. And I think that's why it's important to kind of start with like what comes to mind first, but then start to whittle away at that. Like a lot of analogies, right? The layers of the onion, like that we peel back the layer of the onion. I like the 1,000-petaled lotus, right? So we're peeling back rungs of petals, right? So we want to always go a little bit deeper. That does not mean this has to be the most complex, like self-involved process. It just means that there should be some thoughtfulness to it. And it should be, the ability to be deeply thoughtful with self, like what's under, like, for example, like if I'm a patient who really suffers from anxiety, which I may or may not, then I want to think about, like, if I want to feel better, right, I have to define what better means and what it means to me. So if I were to dive into that and say, okay, I have so much anxiety, I'd really like to feel some relief from my anxiety, that might be my starting point. And where I may arrive through that process might be, I'd like to release, right? I might have a lot that I'm holding on to that I need to help move. I also may have something at a very deep level that's wounded for me that I'd like to heal, right? Now we're getting to some of that core work, right? Like those core terms that can provide that architecture or purpose or direction for an intention. Or it may be that I'd like to experience more peace, right? And I think these types of like root origin work, and it may look different for all of us. This is just a really like basic example. But like for me, if I was really suffering from anxiety and I really just wanted to feel better, I'd really have to define what that looked like and then kind of get to the bottom, right? Like where is this coming from for me? Maybe it's wound, maybe it's fear, maybe it's grief, maybe it's loss, maybe it's that I just don't have enough peace or what brings me joy. So when we get to these places is really where I think the intention comes from. It's really from the roots of the flower, not the petals. So we really want to get to those places so that we can start to articulate what our intention may be. But that's not to say that there's like one right answer either, right? Like I've had some intentions that I thought were like what my intention was and had them shift or change. And that's okay too. These are fluid. They are not static. They're not gospel. They're not religion. It's very simple and it's very personal. So like everything in life, it may alter, it may shift, it may change. Sometimes I find if I have time, I'll actually set my intention in my dream state as I go into sleep. I will actually set this intention with my subconscious in dream and see what comes of it first. And I may even find different layers of it through that subconscious process for myself, where I'll almost see, oh, that's actually not it. It's something over here, right? We may be looking over here, but it's something over here. So I think there's lots of different ways to kind of unfold this or work with your subconscious. This is definitely something that I think coaching, psychotherapy, facilitation can be incredibly valuable at helping us learn the process for ourselves on how to set an intention. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you just said. And yeah, as you said, it's really finding what it means for you, what it means being joyful, what it means being at peace.
Yeah.
It's really finding that definition for yourself, because we're often stuck and there's a lot of the symptoms, we can say, the anxiety, depression, that comes also from societal expectations or societal definition of how life should be, and we are just trying to fit into a box that does not correspond to who we are. And so that's why it's so important to find what is our definition of that, because we are building our own life. Or I like that you used the lotus as feeling the petals, but at the same time we can also say that we are all of us, each one of us, we are all our own unique seed. And so the way we're gonna flourish or blossom will be so different than anything else around. And so with these non-ordinary states of mind, with the therapist, with the coach, with these processes, that's what we're looking for. And the intention setting that will help us to really find what it means for us.
Yeah.
and the medicine and the treatment and the process and the program and so on, whatever you
Yeah.
choose to go, you choose to use ketamine or other plant
Yeah.
medicine or therapist or coaching, whatever feels right for you, that will
Yeah.
support you to find your way to build your path.
I think you touched on something so imperative, and I don't mean to make a huge deviation here, but it is about creating this inner language, right? We want to really be in dialogue with self. And I don't mean that like in the logic brain. I mean that like we're creating language for ourselves. Where do I feel pain? Where do I feel grief? Like, how does grief feel for me? Like, it's getting in touch with our emotional body, our physical body, our spiritual body. And that really is the process of, what comes following that integration process, right? Is like making all of those layers fold in nicely. But I think weaving those fabrics together. But from an intention standpoint, it's almost like intentions is kind of where integration starts. So I love that
Absolutely.
idea of that continuum, right? And I think it really is. And I think, in many psychotherapeutic relationships, coaching relationships, spiritual relationships, we find that we're really there to learn how to talk with self, right? How to be attuned to our own self. And in order to do that, sometimes we have to create language or patterns that allow us to do so. Because oftentimes, I think I find this with clients over and over again, including myself and the people I know and love, is that we come here with a lot of programming, right? A lot of really preset, detailed, like programming in our brain. Some of this is societal, right? Some of this is parental, our upbringing. Some of this is just stuff we've picked up along the way as little shortcuts. Our brain does that. It looks for shortcuts to do things easier. They're not always effective. So really, there is quite a bit of programming that we must overcome to really get to those deeper places. But this is that process. This is what we have to do to get to that. And this is like a bigger process at large, right? Like this is the process that really helps us with all of the things. It's creating this internal language and this ability to kind of identify self and feeling body and spiritual body and physical body, right? Do you think that resonates?
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to add on the, let's say, external influences, also
Yeah.
the language itself, the
Yes.
language that we use, because the language is like an heritage from our ancestrals and has specific meaning. That's why, and that's what we started with this episode with, looking at the dictionary, right?
Yeah.
Also be surprised of certain definitions.
Yeah.
And anyway, the languages, so we can explain it almost on a, if you want, more esoteric way of saying
Yeah.
carries energies, and
Yeah.
it's true. But also we can also be more scientific and just say, so in our brain, right, there is different parts of the brain that are dedicated to languages, to the acquisition of languages and the use of languages, and they create our actual structure, right? And it's so we finished to acquire our native language at 7 years old, right?
Yeah.
And the language is stored in the reptilian brain, while like foreign languages are stored in the cortex, right?
Yeah.
So it's really the reptilian brain that is the most ancient one. So it's really,
Yeah.
really sort of bypass a lot of our conscious mind, right?
Yes.
And so it's
Definitely.
really the language create structures in our brain of how we see the world.
Yeah.
And so much so that, for example, there are certain languages, and there's a branch of linguistics that is dedicated to this.
Yeah.
There are certain languages that don't have certain colors. Okay.
Wow.
And if you don't have that color in your language, you don't see that color. Can you imagine? It
Wow.
sounds like, how can
Yeah.
I not see a color? But you cannot.
Yeah.
There is this in an African tribe, I don't know which one, I forgot, but they have the same name for the color that is the sky and the ground, which for us is like brown
Yeah.
and blue. It's like, how can you not see the difference? And they cannot see the difference. Well,
Wow.
at the same time, they have two different names for another color, and I forgot. And I was so surprised that I could not see the difference, because in our language, so
Yeah.
either Italian but also English, we don't have that differentiation.
Yeah. I think that's incredible. And what an analogy, right, to describe how these presets get programmed into our brain through language, through this architecture of language to make sense of the world around us, and yet may look so differently for all of us, right? Like imagine what that could do on the subconscious level, on the conscious level, to like how we understand self, emotions, connection, comfort, like any of the other things, right? Like this is such a deep concept. So I guess it's worth saying that, right? Like we just have to acknowledge that it exists, right? Like that this is here. We have subconscious programming, we have unconscious programming from,
and it's useful somehow. It's useful. We need the language. But we also need, as you said, to acknowledge that this limits us in some way. And so finding our own internal language, our own internal definitions to build our path once again.
And I think, that definitely reaches out into the nebulous space of like intention setting. But I think it really encompasses some of the road that's laid here and some of the ways that we navigate learning this process. But to bring it back to like setting the intention, we've already kind of discussed that it doesn't have to start right away. It could start days, weeks, or months prior, right? This process may have been started years earlier for you, right? And you're moving to your first or second, session with medicine, with ketamine. So I guess we can unwrap a little bit about what that looks like and where to place this intention, right? Because it really is an energy. And I've said that, but we've talked a lot about language. So and you've talked about this really beautiful act of sharing the intention in ceremony, which I love. There is something different that happens in our brain when we use the language and we speak it, right? There is a different process that happens here. We've put it into the world. We've released its energy. We've moved it out of us into another space. We've shared it. So I think that can also play here. And I often will have people either write out intentions, because that's a different part of the brain that we access, or use language to share them with their peer support. Like maybe you have a moment where we've had stillness and we've had kind of a thoughtfulness moving into our medication sessions. And maybe we do share it with our support person. I always do, because I like to say it. It almost is this vulnerable moment of like me putting it out into the ether, into the world, and releasing it from myself, but giving it some direction, right? So I love to be able to say it. That may not work for everyone, and that's perfectly fine. But journaling it, writing it on a small piece of paper that maybe we release later, and I think even thinking it is just fine. But there are many ways to set this intention, right? We want to set it now in play. We've come to something, we've been thoughtful, we've gone deeper, we've asked questions of self. Maybe we've used some therapy or coaching to arrive here. How do we make this kind of intention? How do we release this intention into the medicine? Like, it can look differently. Any other ideas you have about like setting this intention before our medicine sessions?
So you mean, so once you already work on the intention, we have the intention, the session now is starting, how give it to, like this just come from my my knowledge, or what I'm used to do with ayahuasca. It's really like before taking the medicine, really like with your breath, or you connect with your heart with your breath, like really blowing. And it's that's again, it comes from the tribes in Peru, but also many other tribes that work with ayahuasca, and it's really blowing your breath, send your intention. And you remember, breath is life, breath is life. So you just start to connect and send your life, your intention, that becomes alive to the medicine.
I love
without
that
breath we don't live. Sorry.
I love that process. It's like you're blowing your intention to life in that way, right? And you're sharing that energy with the medicine, or with the world around you, with the space around you, with the universe around you, and perhaps with the the tribe that's sharing this with you, right? Maybe this in this context is your peer support, and maybe in other ceremony this is the other community going through this with you. So I think that's a really beautiful way to like, I love an action too. So like you could blow your intention into heart space, but also the universe. You could use it to blow into the medicine. In this case, they're little tiny powdery tablets, and some of that may blow away, but you can still do a form of that. I don't mean that literally, but
I
they
guess
are
you
kind of
can
like powdery tablets.
hold them well.
Yeah.
Because like, for example, when you do with tobacco with rapé, that is a secret snuff. So it's a powder. If you start to blowing, it will go everywhere. So, but I still blow my intentions. I just cover like that and just blow through my hand so it doesn't blow up. It doesn't fly everywhere.
I
So
love
that's,
that.
I guess with the tablets, you could, if it's something that resonates with you, you could do the same.
Yeah. I love that. So that's a beautiful kind of more indigenous practice we could bring forward into ketamine treatment. If that's too much for you, or maybe too spiritual or too ceremonious, I think the other acts are writing it down, right? We can journal it or set it out with us in a written form. Some people have even made little note cards that they keep in front of them as they're going through the beginning of this. So they're able to visualize it outside and inside in some ways. You could share it with the peer support person with you and kind of have a moment of like honoring that energy moving out of you and into the subconscious or, universe or the medicine session itself. You could also just spend a thoughtful moment thinking this, right? Almost in a prayer, mantra, or chant. You're welcome to keep this to yourself and something that's really inside. Maybe we do this while we're I oftentimes, as we start a ketamine session, there is this kind of dwell period where we'll hold the medicine in our mouth for 10 or 15 minutes in most cases. So that does give us some time that it's nice to have a distraction because the medicine doesn't taste wonderful. So it can be nice to be, okay, medicine's in, I'm going to sit with my intentions now, right? So this may be just a process of setting maybe some breath work first, maybe a blessing for self and the space to come. Maybe there's some aspect of ceremony for you that feels right. But when we set the intention, it could be done during this medicine session with breath. It can be done with writing, journaling, sharing, language, all kinds. There's no right way or wrong way to set the intention, right? It's just setting the moment with energy and moving it into the non-ordinary state. So what happens to the intention once we've moved into this, like past this liminal state into the non-ordinary? Like what happens to the intention? What do we do with it now? I want first, Mel, for you to share your analogy that you use for how you feel about once you've released your intention. Like tell me how what you do. I love this.
We were discussing about the non-attachment part because we discussed so far how important it is to have an intention, how important it is to work on intention, right? Or how important it is to grab all this energy that to focus towards your target, even though we said that it's not straightforward as the arrow to the target, but still we talk about the target. But then we also acknowledge before starting the podcast, like how the non-attachment part is very important. So, and now I think there's can be a confusion now. It's like, how am I supposed to have to work on intention maybe for a week, months, years beforehand, and then and so focus all this energy and then don't care about it, like detach, right? And it probably sounds very confusing for our logic brain, as we said before. So the goal setting part of the mind is like, how do I have a goal? And I have the goal and now forget about it. But that's how it works, for medicine, for manifestation. And so the analogy that I shared with Rachel before, and I'll share with all of you, that I think that works for me at least, is like, imagine that I have this balloon. So I blew all the intentions in this balloon, like in helium gas, right? That flows. So it's like I put all my intention, create this balloon, very nice, perfect. And now at this point, I let it go to the universe, trusting that then it will come back the way that is perfect, the way that is meant to be. But really, it's really, I really like this analogy, because like you have all the intention and you want it so much, but unless you don't let go this balloon, or
Yep.
even like the Chinese lamp, that's nice also, whatever you like more.
Yep.
Unless you don't let go to fly,
Yeah.
it won't happen.
Yes. It can't do anything stuck inside of you, right? Like if we hold on to it. But I think you're right. It can be really confusing for our logic brain, those especially that are very logic dominant, to just abandon this intention all of a sudden, right? Because it does feel like we've spent all this time and focus and cultivation of this, like this baby intention, and now we're just going to abandon it. But that's the point. We want to release it. We are not attached to the path it takes to find its outcome. We're releasing it to the universe. This is also really tied into a lot of manifestation, like
Yes.
processes, right? You cannot be so attached, because what that does is it really constricts the energy. It really creates more of a tight grasp on something. And what we want to do is expand and open, right? So we have to have this ability to let it go and to release it with love and compassion into the universe.
Yeah.
So to allow that energy to continue how it needs to work, right? Or what needs to happen here, or how that may manifest, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's where people get, because it's not logical, right? It doesn't
No.
fit in our logic brain at all. But it does have another, like for me, I have a felt sense that that is true. So like for me, somewhere in my emotional body, that like makes a ton of sense to me. It's like, oh yeah, absolutely. You gotta let that stuff go. You spend time cultivating it, but then you have to release it. And I spent a very long time in my therapeutic journey learning that. But now I have a felt sense that that feels right for me to let something go, to release it out there, knowing that trusting that it will be handled the way it should. And that I may not be aware, like I may not be able to tolerate or have capacity for how that should unfold, how that should work itself out, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I love that analogy, at least for myself. But yeah, everyone is welcome to use it, because
Yeah.
it's as you said, like, if the balloon is here, or the Chinese lamp with the light,
Yeah.
right? Both are nice. You're not allowed to let it go, and that's why when you let it go, that what helps me is like imagine how beautiful it is to see him flying out in the sky,
Yeah.
and that's when you
Yeah.
said the expansion, and
Mhm.
it's just like, okay, I'm just gonna unfold where this
Mhm.
lamp will go in the sky, and just look at it. It's like, oh, how beautiful. I
Well, and
created
you
this
think
intention,
about
it goes.
maybe there are other people on other banks looking at this beautiful lantern that
Of
didn't
course,
release
yes.
it and get to share it, right? Like there's all these other beautiful aspects that we don't even get to, because we're so egocentric often in our cultures, especially Western cultures, that we don't even understand the way that this energy may need to impact the rest of the universe, right? Like the release, the universe knows what to do with it. The earth knows what to do with it, right? Those energies. We're already sharing, hey, we don't know the pathway through this. We're open to you helping show us, right? That can be a really important part of these medicine sessions having efficacy, right? Like having an experiential benefit. But I think it's important to note that, like, I always tell people this, and this is part of that non attachment, because sometimes if we pick a really specific goal, which is why I think some of these intentions need to be not terribly specific, right? Because you may get to the bottom of that rabbit hole internally and figure out, oh, gosh, it's my 5-year-old self that I really want to forgive for this thing, or my parent, this one person I really want to release. That may be very true and very valuable information. But almost we have to take that and say, okay, how do I wrap that up into a nice generalized kind of intention, right? To heal a wound, to explore a version of self, to find more peace. I think when we do this, we set ourselves up for experience, but I'm going to explain why. Because when we have a very specific intention, or something that's very, very targeted, right? Like we talked about, that's not the way this process works. So, what often happens for folks when they do choose a very specific kind of target is that it will get very lost inside of the non ordinary space. Because oftentimes our brain may be like, I know you think it's that thing, but it's actually this thing over here. Or the medicine may help us to see that it is not the thing we thought it was. It's actually something behind that, or in front of that, or what have you, or related to that. And that's how we're using this medicine. So I always want to remind people to not be stuck on the intention. Do not chase the dragon inside the experience, right? Because that will take away from everything else that we are meant to see, we are meant to feel, we are meant to uncover, we are meant to enjoy. So I've found that folks that sometimes set intention or are very rigid about their intention haven't released it yet, right? Those that are kind of still holding it and holding their balloon close. They struggle in the experience, right, as we move into the non-ordinary state, to have a valuable experience because they may still be holding something so tightly. It's actually a distraction. So it's really this process of being able to release it and keep this kind of, I don't know, thoughtful, mindful architecture to the experience. But it is not a rule, right? Like we actually have to release it so we can enjoy the experience. We're not going to chase dragons inside of this. I mean, sure, if you see a dragon and you want to chase it inside the experience, fine. But what I mean to say, we don't want to chase the intention, right? We don't want to be like, well, I have the key. I just want to unlock the door. Because that oftentimes will leave us not receiving what we were meant to from the experience, the assistance that is here, the unconscious, the subconscious that is available to us now in a different way. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think this is another thing that our logic brain is scratching in his head. It's like, what does this mean? You just said you need to work your intention. Now you cannot be specific, but not be specific. And it's like, but it's true. It's another like logical paradox, but actually how this is working. And the logic paradox here is because we're not used to use our logic brain in this way. We're very more in the West, especially so much more like almost mathematical oriented. This is 1 + 1 minus that. And so like all this this Western science that we're used to, at least the scientific process. Even if we're not scientists, but we follow that mental structure. And so in this case is, as you said, when you want to be that specific in the sense almost factual, maybe we can say factual, like so that's why you say chasing the dragon, because like I need to release or get rid of the 5 years old inside me that is doing that to me. But you bad 5 years old, go away. I don't know. So, and what we want to do here is be specific on, I would like to say, the quality of the being. So who do I want to be? That's the question. So if I want to, or it's more, who do I want to be? So do I want to be joyful person? All right. And so that's why like this intention process, we go from starting, I want to be better, feel better, understanding what it means to feel better. So all this journey of what it means to feel better for you. So again, finding what are your definition, building your own path. And at that point, maybe, and it may at this point, this example sounds, okay, very simple, but maybe easy, but not simple, or simple, but not easy anyway. I was like feeling better at the end after all this journey. The intention is being joyful. Okay. And, but all in between, all this process in between was very important. And we found that the quality of the being is being joyful. And so that's the intention, that it's open. It's an open intention. And allow this non-ordinary state of mind to find what it means to be joyful for you. That in an ordinary state of mind you were not able to find so far. And that will support you to, that's what it means to be joyful. Because finally you will experience deeply inside you what it means. And now you know. And so now you can bring it to your daily life.
I think that's exactly. And that is like the kind of overarching process. And like, just to kind of end with, I think that it's important to note, especially with ketamine, because there is some kind of nuanced differences with other medicines, that sometimes we even choose an intention, we've released it properly, we've had this experience, and we leave the experience without feeling satiated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're like, but I don't feel like I got the thing I was looking
Mm-hmm.
for. I don't feel like there was no relationship to my intention, or there was some really bizarre landscape I was dealing with, or what have you. I think it's important to note that that's common with ketamine experiences. They sometimes can appear chaotic. They sometimes can appear more fragmented in some ways. They can sometimes have a quality to them that isn't always the quality of the intention we set. And that
Mm-hmm.
is perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
I often find, and this is important to note, that a lot of those folks who set these intentions up front and they do a beautiful job releasing them, and they may have this non-ordinary experience that was like, what? Or really confusing or chaotic or whatever it might be, they find that satiation or that kind of satiety as they follow in the days like the days following experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, it's important to note that the intention isn't always something that we address inside of the experience. Sometimes the experience has a different energy to it or a different quality to it that maybe needs to be there for its reason. But when
Mm-hmm.
we put it all together on the backside, sometimes that's when folks are like, oh, I get it. Or like, that is so important. I didn't see that before. So there is this bigger process that, like, I don't want people to walk away from an experience feeling like you set an intention, you go to the experience, you get your answers. Like, that's not the way it
Mm-hmm.
works. And just to be open to the idea that, like, the experience may influence your brain's ability to figure something out, or the emotional body or the spiritual body's ability to figure something out, but it may occur in days or weeks following. That's part of integration, right? Which is why there's a
Mm-hmm.
continuum between intention and an integration.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the best kind of sources for assistance with this process is therapy, like having a psychotherapeutic relationship, a psychologist, a psychotherapist, a coach, someone that you're working with regularly to kind of help understand this language, define this language that we're creating with self, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think the same thing is true with at least ayahuasca, but all the other non-ordinary states of mind. You may not find the answer to your intention in the
Yeah.
ceremony, in the treatment, but
Mm-hmm.
after this
Yeah.
so what happens those time is that they remove the blocks
Mm-hmm.
during the treatment. The blocks are removed so that then you find the
Yes.
answer, that intention answered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
definitely work with a coach, with therapist, because it's a process.
Yes.
I think we said that before. It's like it's the process of life. As long as there's life, there is this process of self-evolution. And
Yes.
that's what all these tools are helping us to continue our own evolution.
Yes. To
Mm-hmm.
cultivate these tools, right? We want to tenderly and lovingly care for them. And that does not mean that every tool will work for you or there's one right tool and one wrong tool. I believe in this like sense of duality, right? That there are many right answers. So finding the ones that work for you, the way that your process
Mm-hmm.
works best for you, if that's the point, right? It's not
Yes.
which tool you use, it's that you find the right tools for you. So
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right. So thank you, Rachel, so much. This was an amazing podcast.
yeah. Thank
Any
you.
last word that comes to mind?
Yeah, I think this is like we did a decent job at cracking open a pretty nebulous concept. I know this concept
Mm-hmm.
can be really difficult to kind of grasp at and articulate, but I really appreciated like the Indigenous background here and some of the ceremonious like aspects, but also the like take on linguistics. That really struck me as like fascinating and also makes things make so much sense, right? When we realize like our presets and our programming through language. I
Yes.
love that. And I'm excited to do more in the future, but I love getting to spend time with you. So thank you, Mel.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. These podcasts are so beautiful and amazing. And just my last word is again, I don't know, it just seems keep coming in my mind. The balloon. Let's fill out all our balloons and let's have this
Release
beautiful
them. Yeah.
release them and have these beautiful shows of balloon flying.
Mm, I love that. I love picturing that. What a beautiful moment, right? Like the lantern ceremonies or balloon ceremony.
Yes.
So we can picture all of that collectively.
Yeah, they're both beautiful. Thank you everyone for listening. As always, if you have any questions, just comment, send us your questions. We're always here for more podcasts or also to reply directly to you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
Rachel.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.